2022 Work Session meeting. Please stand as we observe a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Ms. Horn. Face the flag. Board members, just a reminder, if you've not already done so, you will need to complete your 7 hours of required annual training by June 30th. TSBA is holding 2 academies in Knox County, one on March 18th and one on June 7th. So please let Terry know as soon as possible if you plan to attend one of those. A policy review meeting is scheduled for March 23rd at 1:30 p.m. and the Joint Education Committee is scheduled to meet on that same day at 4 p.m. Both meetings will be held in the Andrew Johnson Building, first floor boardroom. Also wanted to announce that the window for applications to be the 2022-2023 Board of Education Student Representative is now open, and rising seniors who meet the eligibility requirements listed in Board Policy J450 can submit applications to Terry Coatney in the board office through 4 p.m. on Monday, March 28th. Ms. Horn serves as the board's representative on the selection committee, and I know that we all look forward to updates as the application and interview process begins. So Mr. McMillan is running late tonight, and Ms. Satterfield is traveling, so she will not be here. Are there any requested changes to this agenda? Ms. Henderson? So do we have a motion to approve the agenda? Move to approve. So a motion by Ms. Horn, a second by Ms. Henderson. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. So our priority report in foundational academic skills, Dr. Reiswick. Oh, superintendent's report first. Sorry, Superintendent. I skipped right over you.
That's okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Board members, I'd like to begin by highlighting our virtual Skates and Plates fundraiser, which is sponsored by the Partners in Education Foundation and launched last week. In the 2022 school year, proceeds from the campaign will be used to provide scholarships for Knox County High School seniors, help provide recreational equipment for schools, and fund identified needs for schools across Knox County. The short campaign video is available at knoxschoolspie.org/skatesandplates, and I hope you will consider learning more about this important fundraiser. On a similar note, I'd like to say thank you to the generous donors who helped purchase a playground at New Hopewell Elementary. This was a project that was held a ribbon cutting last week. This initiative was supported by a $50,000 grant from the Boyd Foundation, a $17,000 donation from the Knoxville Academy of Medicine Alliance, and several other gifts. I'm so grateful for all our community partners and especially those who helped make this project possible. I'm also pleased to announce that Knox County Schools will once again offer a free summer learning camp for eligible students this year. The elementary summer learning camp will run from May 31st through June 24th. Let me repeat that. The elementary summer learning camp will run from May 31st through June 24th, and the middle school summer bridge camp will be held from June 1st through June 28th. Again, June 1st through June 28th. These camps are an important chance for students to continue sharpening their skills in English language arts and math, and eligible families will receive more information beginning this week. And finally, I want to remind everyone that our schools will be closed for spring break from March 14th through the 18th. Certainly hope that our students, teachers, and school employees are able to rest and relax during the break, and we look forward to welcoming students back to class on Monday, March 21st. Madam Chair, that concludes my report for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Dr. Reiswick.
Thank you, Ms. Christie. Dr. Murphy and Ms. Shannon Jackson will talk about our second priority today from the ESSER funds. We'll talk about that, and I assure you they're more prepared than I was. I thought I could beat the rain today, and I lost. So they are more prepared than I am. So, Dr. Murphy.
All right. I don't think we got an umbrella allocated for you in the ESSER fund, so we'll work on that now. Good afternoon, guys. I thank you, Madam Chair and the board, for giving us this opportunity to share this month's reporting of our ESSER implementation plan and monitoring plan. So we'll jump right in and get started. But first, I just want to recognize, that part of our reporting out is to report out to a lot of the community stakeholders as well. So just giving you an update since we last met. We met with the MCC, Knox County's Minority Community Council. We met with Principal Advisory Council also, and we have an upcoming meeting with the Minority Advisory Council, as well as County Commission and the Teacher Advisory Council also, which they've all provided very helpful discussion, very healthy discussion around our priorities, and that's just an avenue for us to get some more dialogue and discussion on our priorities. So just some great work that's happening already. Just want to report that out. And also just pushing us back to our vision here, our ESSER vision. As you can tell, we have three major words that I love. They're underlined and bolded. And to me, that really is twofold. It talks about, how do we use our ESSER dollars to provide equity and equality for all of our students across Knox County, not just one particular subgroup, one particular group of schools or one particular school, but all students across all schools and all student groups. So that's what our focus is with these dollars, and thinking about how we can be intentional with that through our priorities, and how can we do that to accelerate the learning from the learning loss with that. Okay. The next slide here, I put this back up as well from last month, because it really talks about twofold what this work is about, really monitoring the implementation for the next 24 months, 2 years, and talking about how we can accelerate the work that we're doing and the strategies that we have in our ESSER plan to make sure that we're meeting the learning loss of our students. And also, twofold, the second part is how can we sustain any of the initiatives and all the priorities and strategies that we put in place as well. So just think about that as acceleration and also sustainability of the programming and the strategies that we'll put in place with this. Okay, once again, here you got our 4 priorities. You have priority 1, which is foundational academic skills, which talks about the strengthening of foundational skills, K through 2 literacy, which you'll hear more about tonight with Shannon Jackson. Also, we have strengthening math skills, 6 through 8, which Algebra 1 as an indicator as well. And then also we have priority 2, effective educators, talking about how we can create a strategic approach to building teacher and school leader capacity. And then secondly in that is creating a plan for recruitment and retention of high quality educators. And then our third priority, which is post-high school readiness, we updated you guys about that one last month. But also lastly we have priority 4, which really talks about the interventions that we want to put in place to make sure we're supporting our students academically and also socially, emotionally, and also creating a safe and healthy learning environment for all of our students and staff across our facilities. Okay, so right here is our board reporting schedule. Okay, so as you can tell, we're on March. So today we'll be talking about foundational academic skills, which is priority 1. And Shannon Jackson is our priority owner. She's our Executive Director of Teaching and Learning, so she will give more in-depth knowledge of the updates with that piece of it. And next month we have up is our Overcoming Obstacles to Learning, which is priority 4. Okay. I want to put this in here just to push us back to the why around priority 1, right? So if we think about, the graph here, if you look at the left, I pulled the data, and if you look on the left there, you have our 3rd grade ELA TCAP trend data. As you can tell, we've historically, over the past 5 years, been hovering around an average of 40% proficiency. But also, you see that 2020 is missing. So due to the events during 2020, we took a huge dip there to 34.7% of our students being proficient. So that shows the urgent need for us to really push in with kindergarten through 2nd grade, thinking about how we can really be strategic and have some strategies that we'll talk about and explain to you guys that we have in place to make sure that we're moving the needle to accelerate moving the needle and closing that gap there. Also, we understand that 3rd grade is a key indicator to make sure students are ready to learn and are ready to learn by 4th grade. So we know that K through 3, they're reading to learn, and then also once they move to 4th grade, they're more hopefully ready to learn with that. And also to your right there, we have our KCS 9th grade Algebra 1 trend data. As you can tell there, we've been hovering historically over the past 5 years at 14% Algebra 1. This does not include 8th grade honors Algebra 1, just to kind of give you that caveat as a reminder there. But we took a pretty significant dip there in 2021 due to our experiences during 2020 with only 7% being proficient there. So that shows the need for priority one, if you will. And I want to go a little deeper and dig a little deeper and just kind of show you some of the subgroup data as well that I pulled. As you can tell here, there is a...
Dr. Murphy?
Yes,
Can I ask you
yes.
a question? And it was talking about the algebra when you talk about we don't count the 8th graders in there.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, that probably skews the data a little bit because just from my experience of having middle schoolers, the 8th graders that take algebra are usually your higher performing kids in algebra.
Yes.
So we're kind of totally taking out your higher performers when we're looking at our data. So why do we not include the 8th graders?
That is, I believe, a state reporting, right? Mhm. Yes. Gotcha, yes. Yes, and also we're looking at that indicator because that is our lowest performing with that, and so that's why we're looking at that indicator with that. Understanding, like you're saying, that my daughter's in 8th grade Algebra 1 as well, so like you're saying, they're honor students that are taking that, and so we're looking at the lower performing to see where we need to move the needle with those low performers there.
But I do think sometimes with the public, it's good to sort of point that out. That
Yes, absolutely.
kind of your higher performer math students are not even considered in this.
Mhm.
Well, and I totally think it's a concern and we've got to do better. But I do think it's good, like when we're talking to the public and stuff, that they realize there's a whole set of kids that are not even
Included,
being
yes.
considered in this.
Yes, and that's why I wanted to bring that caveat there, but I appreciate you bringing it up. Thank you so much for elevating that. And also, if you look at that, this right here is talking about the KCS 3rd grade TCAP subgroup data. Understanding just there is still a gap, obviously. You have the between the white
Murphy?
students and other subgroups here. I'm sorry?
I think Ms. Horn had a question too. Sorry.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm sorry. It was along the same lines because I'm curious, really two things. I would like to see both numbers. I would like to see, because I think we need to know, I'm curious just what the proficiency rate is specifically for 8th
grade.
graders. And then what it is combined, because I feel like we're not looking at the whole picture. And same thing. We absolutely need to be focusing on that number, but we need to see the whole picture.
Yeah,
so
we
if
can
we could add that, that'd be
We
great.
can absolutely
Thank
add
you.
that. Yeah, no problem. And I totally agree with that. We can add that. Just letting you guys know, this is the indicator for the ones where we're showing the need for us to push in with more support, basically. But I can get that to you, no problem. Any other questions? All right. And the next one, as I was mentioning here, just clearly shows the gap that exists that we need to really make sure we're intentional with providing supports. So that gap has not closed, so we have some work to do with accelerating the work with our strategies, and you'll hear a lot more about what we have on deck with our priorities from Shannon as she comes forth here in a second with that. Also, just a quick, just showing you an overview, just like last time, of how we are intentionally monitoring the work that we're doing on a weekly basis with myself. This is what I live and sleep, so it's every day for me. But just making sure we're letting you guys know that we have a laser focus on how we're monitoring each of these strategies at the granular level, okay? But specific to today, this is a huge strategy, as you can tell here. So this is how it's spelled out. We have priority 1, foundational academic skills. The priority owner is Ms. Shannon Jackson, and it's twofold. You have K2 foundational skills, and the priority lead is Ms. Janet Sexton. And then underneath that, you have strategy 1, strategy 1A, 1B, 1C. 1A is instructional expectations, which is what you'll hear about coming up. Strategy 1B, PD opportunities. 1C is tutoring. And then over to your right, you have 6-8 math and algebra 1. Mr. Gary Petco is our priority lead there. And we have strategy 2A, math tutors, the tutoring aspect again, instructional expectations regarding math, 2B, and also the math talent pipeline in 2C, which is a strong need that we recognize also. And just wanted to let you guys know that we have 127 action steps for this priority alone. So that is a lot of work that our teams are doing a great job with, but just let you know the granular level, how we're looking at each of those action steps, 127 of those, and making sure that they're on track. If they're not on track, we're having discussions on how are we thinking collectively on how we can move the needle to remove any barriers that are causing them to not be on track, okay? Any questions here? No lights? Move forward. All right. All right, so the measures of success flow chart, this is how we're measuring. We have created an implementation goal and an outcome goal for each of our strategies, which you will hear about here in a second. And the overarching goal is to make sure that we are keeping, like I say, a keen focus and a keen eye on moving the needle with each of the strategies, making sure that what we're doing is actually working. Are we meeting the deadlines? And we're pushing back to every outcome goal is student-driven as well. So we're making sure we're targeting that, and the ultimate goal, obviously, is to have student success in grade level and post-graduation. And again, this is, we reviewed this I showed you guys this last month, but this is our status evaluation system. I made it a little clearer for you guys this month. If you look at the 4, that's 80% of the current action steps are on track, and also there's some criteria to the right there. And then 3, level 3 is 60%, level 2 is 40%, and then level 1 is 20% on track as well. So this is our, success criteria, if you will, for the work that we're doing. This is kind of guides the work. And so you'll hear throughout the reporting, up next, you'll hear that we may be at a level 4, this is why, we may be at a level 3, this is why, and so forth. Okay, and so next I'll hand it over to Ms. Shannon Jackson, and once again, she's our Executive Director of Teaching and Learning, so she has been doing a great job with her team guiding the work here, and then she'll explain this, and I'll come back and give you the overarching report out, okay?
Thank you, Dr. Murphy. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, superintendent. I'm excited to talk to you about the work that we are doing to address our academic priorities within this. We were able to bring to you a lot of the data that we collected during the needs assessment, which was both student academic data, but also a lot of teacher focus groups, principal focus groups, parent focus groups, and to really get an understanding of all the different tools we needed to bring to bear on these 2 initiatives. So the first one that we are going to talk about today is on instructional expectations. As most of the state, we had a curriculum change this year. So our teachers are going through that curriculum shift. But we also are helping them very intentionally and strategically in a different way than we've helped with curriculum implementation before. So for this case, we have really well-trained teachers. They come to us at this point knowing how evidence-based reading. We've given them a good curriculum, and we are getting to assessing where our students are. So this is about really helping us to look at what's working and what's not working as we're trying to work through the new curriculum and understand where our teachers need a little additional help, or where we need to help them think about making adjustments in the curriculum so that our students are reading on grade level. So we talk in this one about both a walkthrough tool that helps us to identify where we need to provide additional professional development support or additional resources for students. So it's helping us to see both cases. It's also geared towards providing help to families to be able to interpret the data that come to them with those home literacy reports, so that when they get a literacy report about their student, they know both what it means and there's a place for them to go for resources. So part of this is to build out a landing page on our website for families so that no matter where their student falls within that home literacy report, there's a place for them to get some next steps or some resources. So our outcome goals here are that we will increase the effective use of the curriculum with integrity. And we've been intentional about shifting our language here. It used to be fidelity to the curriculum. And fidelity feels like I'm going to read the script, I'm just going to follow what's in the book. We are talking more about integrity and understanding the evidence base behind the design, and then helping teachers to make good instructional decisions with the materials in order to meet the students they have in the classroom. So if they're understanding how it's structured, then they can make changes and adjustments that make sense for their students. Making sure that our parents, again, are able to speak to their students' home literacy reports and know where to go to get support and help. And all of this is to increase students' ability to read grade level text by spring of 2023. So where we are with this one. Right now we're at a level 4, which 4 means we're on track with the action steps that we have started. We developed a district literacy vision. We actually developed it as a literacy and numeracy vision because our K2 teachers teach both numeracy and literacy, so we did one vision for both, but called out specifically what are the actions that need to go into that vision so that we can make sure we're aligning all of our resources, whether that's time, effort, energy, funds, to support that vision. And then we've also been piloting a walkthrough tool to see how that feels with teachers and school leadership, and if we get the right information from it, to be able to then provide support. So meeting with our teachers, it started with a focus group with the 2 schools where we're piloting it. We're going back there tomorrow and the next day to get some feedback from them too on, does this feel like support? Are we understanding what we're seeing so that we're bringing the right supports to you? Our key accomplishments here is that we have shared the literacy vision at Teaching and Learning Days with all of our school-based instructional leaders. We're piloting the walkthrough tool at 2 sites, and we're tailoring our support at those 2 sites based on what we get from that walkthrough information. Our next steps for this one are to share the vision district-wide, and then to obtain some baseline data so that we can use that tool and see where are we across the district as we use it, and then to continue that feedback loop with our 2 pilot schools. Professional development opportunities is another strategy, and this is where, again, our teachers
Ms. Jackson.
know. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Yes.
Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. Can you say, I'm not real familiar with the term walkthrough tool. Can you
Sure.
say a little bit more about that in terms of how it functions and what the benefits are?
Of course. So a walkthrough tool in this case is a tool that we use to go into a classroom, and you just go in and spend about 15 minutes and watch the students and see how are the students responding or not responding, how is time being spent, and then calibrating on that with the group that's going in and out of the classrooms to make sure we're all seeing things the same way, and then thinking through what are the next steps based on what we see. So, we can look at how time is spent, we can look at how students are answering and getting feedback, those kinds of.
So it's used mainly at a classroom level, not at individual student level?
Sure, it's
Right.
right, it's used at the classroom level, that is correct.
Thank you.
Okay, so 1B is focused on professional development opportunities. And this is where I do want to reiterate, I think we're very fortunate in our district that our teachers know the science of reading. There was a law that passed last year, and I think we were in front of you in the spring talking about that we were already in compliance with that law. We've been focused on evidence-based reading for quite some time in this district, and all of our teachers have been through a reading course, and now we're partnered with the university, and our teachers come to us with a good foundation in knowing the evidence base behind teaching reading. And yet there are always opportunities to grow, and there are some need for growing within this priority. One of them is making sure that all of our teachers are able to meet the new state compliance law for recertification if they teach in the K-5 classroom. They have to be able to recertify through professional development opportunity and pass a test on the science of reading. So we have been working with the State Department to craft our own professional development on that. Our teachers can participate in the state's version if they want to, which is Reading 360, or they can go through what we're calling a micro-credentialing program. It's number 3 up here, the Job Embedded Professional Development Program, where they can choose multiple ways to learn that information, or if they already know it, then they can capture some evidence from their classroom and submit that for us to score and be able to sign off that they have indeed mastered that content, and then they're eligible to take that assessment and to recertify for their license with the state. We also we're continuing to do foundational skills professional development. There's always new research and new evidence out there of what is proving to be successful with children, and so we continue to do that through our district learning days and through our teaching and learning days, through our literacy coaches and our department chairs. But then adding into that, number 2 is something I'm very excited about. We have decided to invest in our teachers who are already in our system and have each elementary school will have a literacy specialist, sorry. So we've started our first cohort. We started it on January 24th with 17 schools represented. And so they are going through a 5-course sequence with the University of Tennessee. And at the end of that, they will have their literacy specialist certificate. So each school will have somebody in their building. And we asked our administrators to work with identifying teachers who would remain in the school for 3 years to be able to share their expertise and their knowledge. And they're really focused on identifying reading difficulty, assessing reading difficulty, and then intervening on reading difficulty. So their job is going to be, they'll still be in the classroom, but they will have this endorsement, and they will have the knowledge to be able to guide their peers in terms of getting into some of those more difficult cases to diagnose. And diagnose in the informal term, not in the formal term. Outcome goal here is to really increase our ability to provide targeted intervention based on what we're seeing in the progress monitoring data. We already make sure that we're assigning interventions by deficit, but the more specific we can get, the more effective that intervention will be. And again, our goal here is to increase our students' ability to read at grade level. So where we are on this one, we're at level 3. So we have our first literacy specialist cohort launched on January 24th. These funds were not approved until November, and we were able to get 17 teachers who were able to apply to UT and go through that process. They've given us a lot of feedback on how we can help with that process moving forward, and UT's been a great partner, so we'll be helping people with that process as we launch cohorts 2 and 3. We have completed the reading department has completed the Reading 360 course and has been partnering with the state to make sure that what we're putting together for our professional development that is Knox County focused aligns with the state's professional development as well, so that our teachers are well set up for that recertification assessment. So our next steps are to identify literacy specialist cohort 2 and for our K2 teachers to be able to begin Reading 360. For our teachers who do the micro-credential through us, if they complete that job-embedded professional development and they do that one through us, we are going to pay them a stipend of $1,000 to complete that work. So we're trying to make sure we're compensating them for that extra step of doing that learning and recertifying because it is quite extensive in the ask.
Ms. Jackson, can I ask you a
Yes.
question? So is our goal to have one of these reading specialists in every single elementary school?
That is our goal.
How quickly, do we feel like in the second cohort we could get to that point, or is it going to take several cohorts to get there?
We will run 3 cohorts. Our second cohort begins in the mini term that is between the spring semester and the summer semester, and our third cohort begins in August. So the third cohort will really finish just 6 months behind the first cohort.
So really by mid next year, we should have every school having one.
That is correct. Yes.
Ms. Jackson, another question. So I'm assuming we're paying for UT to do this for each teacher in the cohort. Are we all, and I think I heard you say this correctly, we're also compensating our teachers in addition to that, to their regular pay to go through it?
No, we're paying for the degree, or for the certification.
Right.
It's not a degree, it's 5 courses. And then we are paying for those who complete the micro-credential. So the job-embedded professional development that
Right.
everybody has to do, either Reading 360 or our micro-credential to recertify,
Right.
we're paying those who do our micro-credential. And the state has an opportunity this summer that they'll pay if they choose to do the state's process instead.
Thank you.
So. Okay, so then strategy 3 is focused on tutoring. Tutoring is a strategy that works very well with your economically disadvantaged students. It is, I think it's mostly effective because for those with the ability to get tutoring for their students, they get the tutoring for their students. But economically disadvantaged students may not have either the means or the access to tutoring. We have some rural communities where there are not tutoring centers, and so they may not have access to tutoring. And so this is a strategy where we are looking at the students who are not receiving formal intervention services, but are in that below the 41st percentile. So 41st percentile on one of our screeners means that they are, if they hit that 41st percentile, they're 70% likely to be proficient on our TCAP tests. So what we're looking at are identifying those students who are below that number but not receiving other services and pairing them with a tutor. In K2, we're looking at 1-to-3 ratio. We're hiring tutors for this. They can be full-time, they can be part-time, they can be time card. And they work with the teacher, so the teacher gives them the materials from their own curriculum. and the tutor comes in and tutors them during some of their independent time. So in elementary school, that could be during core extension, or it could be during small group when their small group is not working with the teacher. So it's replacing some of that independent working time with another adult who is focused on those skills that that the students are lagging behind. It could also be used to accelerate students. So if the tutor and the teacher agree that the students would be better off getting some foreshadowing of what's coming, so then when they hear it with small group, with the whole group, they've already had some foundation in that. So this is what we're doing through Tennessee All-Core Tutoring. And so our goal here is that by spring of 2023, the percentage of students receiving tutoring will significantly increase their ability to read at grade level. So we're again focusing on those K-3 foundational skills. Okay, so with this one, we're at level 3. We have created the vision. I actually, when I realized we were going to be doing this last semester, I hired Christine Pope to be our tutoring coordinator through our Title IIA funds, which gives us some sustainability in this initiative as well. This is a pretty big lift. So we've developed training modules for this. We've had partnering conversations with local universities. They are shifting their practicum experiences next year so that they can be tutors and get their hours for their practicum experiences by showing up and tutoring our students. And many universities are doing that. They've been reaching out to us to make that offer, and we've been reaching out back to get those agreements in place. And then we also have shared the vision with 4 pilot schools to organize and pilot the tutoring after spring break here. And then all of the elementary schools have been provided with additional tutoring hours before or after school. So right now they have 2 different options. There's the all-core tutoring, which is the 1-to-3 ratio, using the curriculum materials, partnering with the teacher. And then there's also the before and after school tutoring that we are offering, all elementary schools are offering to their families as well. So our next steps here are to partner with public affairs to develop a marketing plan for recruiting tutors, recruit and train our newly hired tutors, and to share the vision with the district. So I'm actually presenting this with our principal advisory committee this week, and we're looking at some different ways to partner with, maybe some civic organizations and some different possibilities to recruit people in to be tutors for us. So middle school math, you'll hear a lot of similarities with this one, but we have a couple of additional steps with this as well. Also working on math tutors. So when you get into middle school, tutoring is effective with mathematics. It becomes less effective with reading. So we are really honing in here on those middle school math tutors. We're looking to hire approximately 96 or the equivalent of 96 to tutor in grades 6 through 8. Our implementation goal here is that by spring of 2022, we have the tutor training modules. We've got teacher to tutor communication processes. So Christine Pope and Gary Petco, who is our strategy lead, have been out talking with department chairs and math teachers asking, what does this look like in a middle school, and how do we figure out that teacher to tutor communication? And also talking about, is this a helpful tool for you? And then we're looking at developing the quality of implementation metrics so that we know how to look at whether or not this is being successful and where we need to adjust or change what we're doing. By spring of 2023, our goal is to be operating with a minimum of 10% of our students in grades 6 through 8 receiving tutoring services. That would mean that they are participating at least 2 times a week for 30 minutes. So, and then, of course, what we're looking to see on this is that our students score in the proficient performance categories on benchmark assessments, and we'll see that number increase as we refine our tutoring process. So this one is at a level 3. We're mostly on track for where we anticipated being at this point. Recruiting tutors is challenging in both initiatives, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But it's very similar, it's in a similar place with the reading tutors. We're also working on instructional expectations in middle grades math. We ended up with a curriculum shift in August with our middle grades math curriculum. very much focused on the Algebra 1 readiness and on the inquiry behind math learning that needs to take place in that 6th through 8th grade band. So what we're looking to do here is to set up some demonstration classrooms, because what teachers are asking for is to be able to see it in implementation. So, and we're not looking for perfection in the demonstration classrooms. We're looking for people who feel comfortable having folks come into their room and are able to articulate their decision-making so that they can have those good conversations around how they are planning and implementing their curriculum. And we want to start in grade 5. Because there is a lot that happens in grade 5 that sometimes we want to reteach in grade 6 because they're not in the same building. So letting them see that, you know, grade 5 to 6 and grade 8 to 9 is really important for them to have those cross-building conversations. In this one, we're also piloting a walkthrough tool, which also helps us to know where to put our support. And we're looking to increase our students' engagement and math inquiry. And I have to say, in some of the classrooms where I've gotten to see some of this, it's very exciting to see students getting excited about talking about math and really thinking about how they think about that inquiry with their math content. So Gary Petco sitting over there, I'm sure he would love a chance to walk you through one of those inquiry experiences. So spring 2023, we expect to see that alignment between the teaching standard and the classroom instruction increase as we use that walkthrough tool as the measurement for that. So here we're at level 4. They have the district vision created. They've identified the walkthrough tool. They've been meeting with department chairs. I think they've met 5 times. And they're looking on that professional development plan for the demonstration teachers and then developing that communication plan for the district vision so that everybody knows what really clearly what the goals for proficiency in middle grades math is. So their next step is to share that with the department and to identify the next set of schools for the walkthrough tool implementation. Okay, so this one, 2C, will cover some of what I've talked about with the math tutors, but also we're looking at math teachers. So our goal here is to attract, recruit, and retain highly effective middle grade math and Algebra 1 teachers. So math teachers are hard to come by in the secondary schools. They're also hard to come by in the university for introductory math classes. And so we need to get creative in how we start finding people who have the passion and the talent to teach math and just don't realize that they do. So we are looking to identify a cohort of mentor teachers, and these are teachers who are veteran teachers who have been great math teachers and would be willing to take on an apprentice or somebody who is not yet certified in math. And then we'd like to identify some apprentice math teachers who could work with those mentors. These are people who are not yet certified or people who are. So one of the things I'm looking to do is to figure out how I work with public affairs and human resources, essentially to build a bench of math teachers so that we can, right now we can't make a hire if we don't have an open position. And right now, everybody's looking for jobs. So if we don't have an open position, we'll lose math teachers to other districts, but we know we'll have positions come open. So this is a way for us to start getting creative, and we've had some initial meetings to think about what we can do in order to hire as many math teachers as we can, even if we don't yet have positions for them, because we know those positions will come available, but also using our tutors. Identify those who haven't finished their degrees yet, may not be thinking about being math teachers, but fall in love with teaching math, and convince them to work with us as a tutor and to get their math certificate, their math teaching certificate, and come be a math teacher for us. And we've put some funds in place to be able to support them through that process so that hopefully we can get a really stable math teaching population. So this is hopefully with those mentors. The research behind mentorship is that a new teacher with a mentor accelerates his or her effectiveness within the first 3 years. A new teacher with a mentor can generate the same impact on kids as a 5th-year teacher if they have a good mentor who's helping and supporting them. So in this case, we don't have fund. I wish we could do that for everybody. We don't have that amount of funding, but math teachers, I think we're going to invest there. We're also trying to increase the number of high-quality math candidates that are applying to Knox County schools. This one's at a level 2. And this one's at a level 2 because it is a recruitment strategy. We're working to try to identify personnel who are available. A lot of people have left the workforce through the pandemic years, but also we have a smaller population right now of people in the workforce than we used to. So we're having to really look carefully and get some good recruitment strategies on how do we find people to do this work. And so we're looking at tutoring in a position while you're in a school, paying tuition for a teaching degree while you're tutoring and getting job placement, hiring math teachers on an early contract above and beyond our identified vacancies, and attaching new teachers to experienced mentors. Looking at this mentoring program where we can, hopefully retain them. Teachers who are mentored also have a higher level of satisfaction with their job. And so we're working through that process as well. And then also growing your own pipeline. So continuing to look at those creative paths for getting people through licensure. In this case, we are working, like I said, with human resources, with public affairs, to look at some new strategies for how we might attract and retain talent in Knox County. So some marketing campaigns, some collateral. We've talked about possibly getting in front of as many different civic organizations as possible to see if they have some idea of how to help us to recruit tutors. And then through that recruitment, identifying people who maybe want to come and do really meaningful work, teaching middle grades math. So, okay, so I think this is where I turn it back over to Dr. Murphy. Any questions?
Yes, Ms. Jackson, one question about that. We've been hearing the phrase grow your own in a lot of different contexts within Knox County schools and
Yes.
education as a whole recently, even at a state level. The idea of grow your own seems like a pretty long runway. Can you speak some to that?
So I can speak a little bit to grow your own.
Yes.
Human resources can probably speak more to grow your own. But yes, we do see that as a long-term strategy. So when we talked about the 12 to 24 months and then the 3 to 5 years, grow your own, we see the benefit of that in 3 to 5 years in many cases. That's where we're looking at some of those shorter-term strategies with if we can identify some people who are they have a college degree, but they want to come in and tutor for us. Turns out they love math. We've got a partnership with a graduate school that will allow them to tutor for us full-time, receive a salary, and then go through the graduate school program and be ready to teach in a year. So we're looking at a balance of, and then also just I'm trying to think of some different ways to recruit. So we're trying to think of a balance of immediate recruitment strategies and then also those longer-term strategies.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the balance, and the reality is, even if you have a long runway, you'll never get to the end unless you start, right?
Right.
And so I appreciate the focus and the energy on looking at some of those longer-term strategies and not just getting sucked into the urgent, but also looking at the longer-term gains. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Ms. Jackson. And also, like you said, I appreciate it too because it talks about like going back to how do we not put a bandage on it, but how do we meet the immediate needs, but also think about sustainability also with that. So I appreciate that as well. I know our math supervisor is here, Gary Petco, and he ran the numbers for you guys on the 8th grade. So if you guys want to hear those numbers, so we're trying to be proactive here. So you want to come up, Gary, and talk about that? I didn't mean to call you out, but.
Thank you, Gary.
Yes, and I want to introduce Janet Sexton. Janet, can you stand up and raise your hand also? She's key to our team also, so great job.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Did you have to
and-
do math?
Ma'am?
Like really, did you sit over there and do the math on
Oh, that was my next step. I was
Right,
saying,
so-
Madam Chair, we can also do some math. Ms. Jackson talked about discovery. Really, it's some exciting stuff going on. The whole concept of, we used to just give, for example, give a formula, give a rule, and then give examples to it. And now we're trying to go the opposite direction, let the kids discover the concept and discover the rule, and then with real-life examples, and then let them come up with the formula themselves. It's really kind of exciting. So I welcome you into the classes if you want to come in. What we've got for the last year for our 8th grade, we had about 24% of our 8th graders taking Algebra 1 across the district, and that varied from school to school. Some had more, and some had less, anywhere from maybe 40 to down to 9%. Out of those that took the Algebra 1 in the 8th grade, about 61% were on track or masters for that. But since it's a smaller percentage when you consider all the Algebra 1 takers, that drew the average down, skewed it down. So that's what we have.
Gary, do you know, you just mentioned it's a fairly small percentage. Do you have any sense of what the percentage is of total eighth graders versus total number of algebra students?
Great question. The number of eighth graders we had 1,032 eighth graders take Algebra 1.
Okay.
Out of the 4,000 eighth graders in total. So if you throw that in, probably about 1,000, I'd say, if I look at normally we have about 4,000 ninth graders in high schools take it. So probably about, again, 20% of them.
Yeah. About a fifth, okay.
Do
Thank
it
you.
down. Mhm. Still, 61% is not what we want. We want higher than that, but we're going to get there. I promise you.
Ms. Horn.
Can you hear me? I haven't.
Yes.
My seat is at the wrong height, and I keep hitting the button, so sorry about that. Okay, a question. I spoke with one of our great eighth grade algebra teachers who I think like every kid in his class is proficient, and one of the issues that he brought up was kids knowing multiplication facts, and obviously they learned that, in third grade?
Yes, they started third grade, yes.
So, but by the time they get to eighth, ninth grade, if they haven't been reviewing those constantly, they get to eighth grade or they get to ninth grade algebra and they, have to reteach or whatever. So are changes being made to increase the repetition throughout the grades so that doesn't need to be retaught when they get to algebra?
Great question. I think yes. The answer is yes. We're trying to reintroduce it throughout the whole third grade through. I think we ran into if I ask anyone, if I'm in a social setting, they ask what you do, and I tell them I'm a teacher, they all want to talk about math. Or they want to talk about teaching. When I say I was a math teacher, then, the two things that come out of people's mouths is, well, I'm not a math person, or I hated math. And then the next question is, why can't we just memorize multiplication tables like we used to? And I want to say, well, if you didn't like math, you weren't good, how'd that memorization work out for you? Because memorization is kind of a chore. And there is a need for rote automaticity after a while. But I think we went through a phase where early on, or when third grade, fourth grade is when students gain their most powerful impression about mathematics. And that's when we're having them doing straight memorization first. I think about the old Barney Fife show on Andy Griffith. We tried to memorize the preamble. I can memorize the preamble, but that doesn't mean I know anything about democracy. But if I understand the concept of democracy, then I have a better chance of putting it all together. So the changes that are being made over the past years is having kids visualize the mathematics. What is 8 times 6, rather than memorize 8 times 6 at first is 48. Can we understand that 8 times 6 is 8 groups of 6 and see it in an area model, see it, visualize what that is, so then when we get to contextual problems, now it makes sense. By doing that and then continuing to review that over the course of the middle school, and I think with this new middle school curriculum we're doing, it's really doing that as well. I think it will help when we get to the Algebra 1. I do think, again, I don't want to say that we shouldn't memorize multiplication. That's not the point. That shouldn't be our default way to start doing it. I think we've done that in the past, and that has led to less retention over years.
Okay, that makes sense, but so are you saying that they're not expected to memorize multiplication facts?
No, ma'am. I'm saying that's not their initial way to learn it.
Okay.
Yes.
So I understand and it makes sense if they
Yes.
understand the concept
Yes.
behind it. So they are then
Yes.
required to memorize, because
Abs-
to me, you have to, you understand the concept, but you have to memorize it at some point. Otherwise,
Absolutely.
when you get to algebra, you're trying to figure out, takes you 5 minutes to figure out the multiplication before you can get to the problem. So,
Yes, absolutely it is. That's a road to get to memorization, but
Okay.
not straight starting with that. And I
Okay.
think that's the point.
okay, and so when do they actually memorize those now? Is it third grade, fourth grade?
Good question. By the end of third grade, they're supposed to be fluent in their multiplication through 0 through 9. And when I think of fluent, I think of the word fluid in there somewhere. So I think of water being fluid doesn't have to move fast to be fluid. It just has to move, and if it hits an obstacle, it knows how to get around it. That's what water being fluid is. So in third grade, when we say they have to be fluent in mathematics, it's not quick recall. It's just can they understand what 8 times 9 is and get the answer, maybe not quickly, And then by the time 4th and 5th grade finishes up, that's when we should have rote automaticity by that time.
Okay, so one more question.
Yeah.
So when we get to TCAP for 3rd grade math, are they, I'm assuming that it reflects that, so that they're not, when they're taking a timed test, they're not being, it's not going to reflect negatively on them because of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yes, it does. And I think that's why we're teaching them the skills so that if they don't get it quickly, they have the way to get that answer. And it's not, I guess the way I look at, like my son, if I ask him what 5 times 7 is, he's going to tell me at very first, when he first learned multiplication, he's going to think to himself, well, I know that 5 times 5 is 25. And I know that, and what can I do from there? 5 times 7, 2 times 7 is 14, and I can add those together. So he's starting to find different ways to get that answer. And I think that's helping. So when they do have TCAP and it is timed, if they don't get it quickly, they've got another way to get around it. If that makes sense. So bottom line is by coming at it from the conceptual direction first, I think it helps with the memorization. And it doesn't hurt them on the TCAP by the end of 3rd grade. 4th and 5th grade, we want them to try to have more rote automaticity and memorization. And we are trying to review that in the middle school's grades as well, because it builds up their self-efficacy. Anybody that can do their multiplication quickly, they feel better about themselves.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I have one more question.
Yes.
And I think this kind of pairs a little bit with what she's asking, and I know you've struggled with me since my kids were in middle school on math, and I was a parent. I've been calling Mr. Petco about math for a while, but it kind of goes along with probably what I was dealing with back when my kids were in middle school. Is I think a lot of this is such a different way than we learned math. I mean, I had my flashcards and I learned it, and I still don't know my 7s and my 8s timetables very well, but that was kind of the way we learned it, and it sounds like there's new concepts. But I think what I hear struggles a lot of times, and I'll see people posting, is the parents are just like, why are they doing this? And so I do have that question, are we trying to educate parents at all to help them understand why we're changing the way we're doing math? And when you explain it to me, I can understand it, but I still see these parents who struggle of like, why are we just not teaching, why are we just not doing the flashcards and sitting down and memorizing it?
Right.
So I do think there's some parent education that sometimes can help, and I don't know how well we're doing that, and so that's a question for you.
What we're attempting to do. Okay, let me tell you, we are. There's a couple of things. Every one of our math lessons in elementary school have a parent page that can go home with their parents. We have on the Aspen page, you can actually find the math Aspen page, and it has every one of those synced letters already on there in a PDF form that a parent can access. That goes for when we're learning multiplication or we're learning division. It says this is what the student's going to learn this week, and it has a step-by-step process. In addition, on that Aspen page, along with on our math website page, we have a math YouTube channel that we have close to 216 videos produced by our coaches and our teachers, and they're anywhere from 4 to 10 minutes long, and it's broken down by grade and by topic. So if you're not sure how to do multiplication by the area model, you can look at that video. Now, just having those out there is not the final solution. We got to continue to get that message out that they are out there. That's a challenge, but we're continuing to send that message anytime we can when we have parent meetings or getting our teachers to get out there. If a parent calls and asks, how can I help? We can direct them to the math YouTube channel. We can direct them to the Aspen pages of the math Aspen page. We also have ways you can help your child with math homework on that math Aspen page, and all the parents do is just access that. So getting that message out is just continuing to do that. I think, I don't know if we've talked about the department chairs at one of the previous meetings. As we start building in elementary department chairs, that's one of their tasks, is continue to make sure our teachers are all aware of the math resources that are out there for their parents. And that YouTube channel is pretty good. You want to see it?
So it sounds like we've got some good resources out there. Sometimes it's just communicating out to people that it's there and that type of stuff. So-
Absolutely.
Okay, well,
Yes.
that's good to know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay, thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Petco. So hopefully that kind of provides some more clarity around that. I appreciate that. And like you say, this is a team, so it's a team effort with us. So we meet weekly and kind of dialogue around these things, so that helps us out at all as well. So I wanted to touch base right here, just letting you guys know overall where we are with this priority. We're at level 3, specifically looking at the data that I pulled, the strategies that are on track. We're at 83%. 5 out of the 6 are on track, and like Ms. Jackson mentioned, strategy 2C is at level 2, just based on the breadth of the work that we have to do there with finding those tutors and recruitment and retention of those tutors in that piece of it. Also, the action steps that are completed are 32%, meaning that's 24 out of the 75 action steps that have been started. Okay, so also the action steps that are on track, 65%, 49 out of 75. Action steps with minor delays, and that's also again in 2C. There are 2 that are with minor delays there as well. And overall, the action steps not started, and that's based on timelines because a lot of the work is forecasted out this summer with professional development, things of that nature that just hadn't started yet. And so those are 52 out of 127, which is 41%. And also, we kept these 3 barriers in here from last month because these are things that, obviously you can tell that we want to elevate and have, make sure we keep our eyes on this, just managing the change on a critical timeline that we have, and also planning ahead with procurement and hiring and things of that nature, and also the staffing challenges that Shannon Jackson has alluded to as well. Did you want to speak more into that?
So the 2 strategies dealing with finding the tutors and also with the math teachers, the staffing challenges, it's finding the personnel. So getting creative in ways that we can tap into people who we don't normally access, because right now the way to find a job posting for us is to go to our website. You have to be looking for a job. So how do we pull people to us who haven't thought that working in the school system might be a great, meaningful job? And for anybody who's listening, it is the most meaningful work you will do, so come to our website. And then also just planning ahead for procurement. Because these are all purchased with federal funds, there is a higher bar for getting through the procurement process. And so we are being very intentional about planning that out and working with procurement to make sure that everything that we do put out for bid is available to be purchased with federal dollars.
All right, sorry. Thank you so much. And just any questions on that? Sorry about that. Any questions from this slide? All right. Practicing my wait time. We're good. All right. That was 2 seconds. Sorry. All right. So the next slide, just always finishing with this understanding that we're talking about acceleration, yes, but also sustainability, because we don't want to just focus on accelerating, spending the allocated ESSER dollars and then just dropping the ball with sustainability for our students, because we want to make sure we look at the bigger picture of this also. So our next board share out will be next month with priority 4, overcoming obstacles, with Mr. Jason Myers to learning. So we're looking forward to that also. So just giving you an understanding of how it works is this past February, myself and Shannon's team prepped and planned for this month. So in March, we'll be planning with Jason and his team for April share out. So we meet weekly with all the strategies, but we kind of put a laser focus on the strategy where we're really honing in on. And I like our model because it really, it helps me, and I'm just going to give a testimonial just being out the principal seat, freshly out the principal seat, I guess 6 or 8 months now. When I'm looking at the strategies and looking at the work, it's promising, and I'm beginning to visualize how it's going to look at the school site, right? I'm beginning to look at, visualize my former students and staff. So it's good stuff that we have here. So we just have to make sure we're keeping our eye on it and keeping a laser focus on it. So any other questions or comments?
Doesn't look like it, so thank you, Dr. Murphy. Yes, Mr. Jen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to say that, from what you all have talked about today, it sounds like you all are doing fantastic work, and I'm really appreciative of all the hard work that everyone has put into this, because I do feel like this will really, really help students moving forward in the future, not just recovering from what the pandemic has caused, but also improving those proficiency levels, into the future. So again, thank you for all the hard work.
Yes, I thank you so much for that compliment, because I do believe that with our outcome goals and our implementation goals, we develop those with our REA department. being really strategic with that and making sure that it's driven by student data also. So we are looking at that, and like I said, I'm living and breathing that. So I have that pulled up on my computer every morning, and this is what I'm living, so I appreciate that.
Ms. Owen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say that I appreciate the intentional shift from fidelity to integrity. I think that is a very important way of looking at it, and I think our teachers will very much appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, integrity of implementation, I think, is what it's about. So that really focuses on sustainability, and it pushes back to, are we doing the right work for our students? This is what this is all about. So which is what we're very passionate about. So thank you guys so much, and I will get out of your way. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Jackson. Mr. Petco? Okay, so moving into the discussion on the agenda. Under 8C, item 1 or 2, any questions? Ms. Horn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question on the Department of Education Tennessee School Climate Survey. Somebody could speak to that and whether that's a replacement for what Steve Rutter usually does for school survey, climate and that kind of thing.
Is that Dr. Rice?
Oh, sorry. I don't want to jump the gun. Thank you, Miss Christie. So I would say Ms. Cook's here, so she can answer maybe more in depth. But basically, this is for students who have gone through the state trauma-informed process. This was a requirement for them to do that for this survey. So we had 7 schools that previously had been done that we've approved this for in past years, and so we have 3 additional schools that need to take that survey now in order to get the state certification.
Okay, so it's only that small segment of
Correct.
students. Okay, thank you.
Okay, all right. So item 3 or 4? Items 5 or 6? 7 or 8? 9 or 10? Okay, moving to board policies. Items A or B? C or D? Item E? Under grants, item A or B? Mr. Watson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I just appreciate Knox Ed Foundation and their continued support of what we're doing through Knox County Schools. And notice that in the funding, there's actually school money allocated for all of our schools across the district at different amounts. Can somebody speak just a little bit to some of the different types of things schools might be using some of these funds for from Knox Ed Foundation?
Is that you, Dr. Riswick?
It is. Thank you, Ms. Christie. Thank you, Mr. Watson. So the way that reads, so those haven't been turned in yet. I'll give you breakdowns on how the funds are distributed, but funds will be awarded to promote school-wide or targeted student support, high-quality professional development for teachers, making sure they have what they need to support student learning. And the way that's kind of that was sent out to the schools as kind of the parameters for it, and so they're sending in individual school requests for that. So the way those dollars are allocated, if you are a current community school, that those schools get $5,000. If you are one of the 7 high schools involved in the forward NGL work that we've talked about, then they're getting $2,500, and then all other schools are getting $1,500. So within those parameters to support the teachers and or the students.
Thank you.
So any other questions on A or B? Item C? Or item D? So contracts, 11, any questions on item A or B? Ms. Babb?
Yes, could somebody just talk about the mass notification system and what it is and how it compares to whatever we're doing now?
Ms. Harrington?
Thank you. So our contract with our mass notification provider expires at the end of the school year. So we initiated a bid process, and Parent Square was selected from a committee. And so Parent Square is very similar to what we're using now in the sense that it's a two-way, it's a mass notification system, but it's different in a lot of other ways because it will provide two-way communication through not just mass notification, but classroom communication, so teachers could communicate with students and parents through this platform. There's also a language integration platform, and there is also some other features that we'll be getting through this contract, such as a mobile app and an opportunity for forms to be digitized. So we're real excited about it.
And I don't know, have you talked to any high school teachers? I mean, I know when mine were in high school, that a big thing was like group me's that the teachers had, and I didn't know if they had been talked about this, if they thought it would be a good addition, or?
We did have some administrators on our committee, but that's probably going to be a discussion that we're going to have in terms of, because it's not just high school, it's across all of our schools in terms of some of our schools use Remind, some of them use Class Dojo, so those are some things, some conversations that we're going to have.
Mr. Watson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Will there be any consolidation of other services that we use? I know our other contract is running out, but I remember the board last year, I think, approved another service that had some language translation capability, and I know this new software does as well. So is there any consolidation?
There is. So right now, it's not through the district, but it's through Knox Education Foundation. They have a pilot program through our 16 community schools with talking points. And so with this new contract, we're going to not use talking points for this school year, but we'll take a look at how Parent Square is working with those communities. And if we need to reevaluate that, Knox Ed Foundation has been very open to having those conversations again.
So have we already implemented talking points, and now we might be retracting it?
Talking Points was implemented this school year. So there are some ELL teachers that have been using it even before this school year. But yes, it was implemented for this school year.
And the new software would not go into effect until this coming school year?
Right, it would go into effect July 1.
Okay, thank you.
So moving to regular agenda items, 12A or B. Mr. Watson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have I dug into the balance designation in letter B, and I noticed there was funds in there for some data aggregation software, and I know Chief has talked about that several times. I'm assuming this is something different than for CAS 5, and do we know I know the initial implementation is around $200,000. Do we know the ongoing costs for that software?
What we're looking at would be, what we're looking at would be about $30,000 a year ongoing for our dispatch and report management system is what we're talking about.
Can you speak to some of the types of data that we'll be able to aggregate using this platform? Sorry, Russ, I didn't prepare you for these questions.
No, I can't, as a matter of fact, because all of my security experts are somewhere else right now. And, but we have the foresight to ask them to provide me some bullet points. So what we're looking at is it's a computer-assisted dispatch system. It will help manage our dispatch records. It'll help manage text-to-tip and community reporting, all integrated into a central system where it comes in and will link the reports to dispatch and will help us maintain those reports and go back and pull them up electronically so that we have a long-term and a quick, easy way to capture our history. It also integrates cellular devices and speech-to-text within the system. And let's see. It'll also support and execute the management of simultaneous events. And you know, we have talked about, you know, data aggregation, but this is more of a dispatch management and an information management system for our calls that we work. It is not necessarily the system that we will need to reach out and pull information in to help us make broad assessments of what our security posture needs to be, or what the security threat needs to be. This system will help us with some of that, but it is not the end state for that. There's other systems that we need to look at over time to bring in to do that. It's my understanding.
So this is more of a replacement system with additional functionality?
Yes, sir.
And then,
Well, it is, right now, our system is what I would call analog.
Right.
It's guys with spreadsheets and logbooks maintaining that. This will help us get away from that.
okay, and then my last question is, I think I read this right, this is also asking for 20 additional SSOs.
We are asking for 20 additional SSOs in the upcoming budget year.
Right.
You know, what we have found this year, particularly with COVID, is that we have struggled on days when we have high absentee to get our bases covered. We've also found that over time, particularly to when we do things like random searches, or we need to plus up our presence in some areas, we have to pull down in other areas, and we don't really want to do that. We want to build in a little bit of flexibility in the force. So we will be asking for that, or we've asked for that in the current draft of the FY23 budget. That, of course, has not been approved yet, but should it be approved, we will need to put those individuals in academy classes this summer and this fall, and we'll need to have the equipment on hand to provide to them. So this will allow us to plus up our equipment reserves, like in firearms and radios and vests and badges and all that kind of stuff, so that we'll have what they need to do their job.
So the additional SSOs are primarily, from what I understand you saying, is to handle our existing coverage. It's not necessarily new designated deployments at different schools?
Well, there will be new designated deployments at different schools, but what it will do is it will give us more depth, so that on a daily basis, when we move people around, we're not having to pull down our staffing at certain schools too greatly, or to lean more heavily on law enforcement as well, who has the same challenge we do on a daily basis, keeping their folks in our schools.
So my last question then is, if there's designated deployments, is that, do you have a sense already in terms of, are these additional deployments within elementary schools, middle schools, high schools? Do we have a sense of?
It will depend, and that goes back to, we want to have the flexibility to, when we do our analysis of what the threat is, that we have the flexibility to change our posture and reassign people in order to make sure that we have the right people in the right place to address any threat that we've designed. So what it will do is it will allow us to flow people from one post to another post without pulling them off. So you'll basically have two categories of officer. You'll have officers that are assigned to a school, and then you'll have officers that will be temporarily assigned to places based on what the threat may be.
That's helpful. Thank you, Mr. Oates.
So any more questions on those two items? So item C. Okay. And item D, and before we discuss item D, just a couple of things. I think Gary's going to give us an update on the current situation, since there were some developments today, but also, before you do that, I would just like to say that when we moved to this resolution, that this resolution was not presented to county commission by board members. That's a false assumption out there, that this resolution was written by Commissioner Beeler and presented to county commissioners by Chairman Beeler. So, Mr. Dupler?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So yes, you've requested a status update, and happy to do that. There's been quite a bit going on in the mask mandate case, MB et al. Versus Governor Lee et al. Since the board's last meeting. But I will talk about the legal end of it, starting with last week. So a week ago, we received a motion from the plaintiffs to modify the mandate to what the new CDC guidelines are, which had come out a short time before that. After that, we had been working hard, have been working hard throughout, but we're working even harder to comply with this board's request to file our own, what you called a motion to reconsider. It's actually legally called a motion to dissolve the preliminary injunction. And so we've been working on that as well, and we had to then respond to what the plaintiffs filed on Monday. So that's been done at this point. We, on behalf of the board, are asking for, obviously, the mandate to end, period, not tied to the CDC. So then some other things went on last week, reported in the news. Our office has always maintained that we welcome parent assistance, particularly through things like amicus curiae briefs and that nature. Well, that has finally come to fruition. What we've seen in the past week is that a new case has been filed involving the same parties, but new plaintiffs. That's the unmasked Knox County kids case. That was first introduced by Mayor Jacobs and Representative Zachary. We've also seen, as of last Friday, I believe, some parents intervened in the existing case through local attorney Andy Fox. So obviously things have been occurring. And then today, this morning, late morning, we received a motion from an order from Judge Greer. It's fairly short, ordering that the parties in our case that I've been discussing go to mediation. And that's the federal mediation process is what he ordered, and that's to occur within 60 days. However, there was some confusion around some language in that order about a stay. And I believe media outlets have already reported on this, stating that, it did not stay the actual injunction. And frankly, it can be read more than one way, but it talks, with the order talking about going to mediation, we felt like, our office felt like we needed to, matter of fact, the federal rules required that we ask for clarification from the judge. So that's already been done. So we've already asked for clarification from the judge on that order. And lastly, another thing that's developed today, and let me say this as well. This board had designees to negotiate this case. That has been ongoing, and Chair Christie and Jason Myers have been involved in that as well. We've also been talking to the plaintiff's attorneys about a proposal to unmask during negotiations, or during mediation. So I can probably talk a little bit more about that, in case the board wants to go ahead and have a resolution on that.
Do you want to talk more about that now? Yeah, I think a resolution or
Okay.
anything we can do to get masks off of kids quickly, I think we need to discuss.
So I don't want to misspeak, so let me refer to the proposal. And again, it's just a proposal, but it's something we could be working on with the board's permission. I had it here, sorry. Hold on a minute. I think I just found it. Sorry. Okay. So the proposal we're working on, obviously, the board disagrees with the plaintiffs as far as the reasoning to take off masks. So the plaintiffs have made it clear that they are requesting the court adopt the CDC guidelines, the new CDC guidelines. Our counter is that, we don't agree with that state law wouldn't allow us to agree to that. And so what the proposal would be from both the plaintiffs and the board would be to the judge, assuming the judge were to agree with it, that while, the parties do not agree as to why the lifting of the mandate, that we would agree to lift the mask mandate while mediation is occurring. So that's the proposal.
Ms. Babb?
Yes, so I want some clarification. So I know the plaintiffs put forth to the judge about following CDC guidelines. We put forth some other things. The judge is basically, from my understanding of this, not coming back on either of those and telling the two parties to mediate it. Is that right?
That's correct.
And if the judge tells us to mediate it, is it required?
Yes.
Okay, which we could have started a while ago, I guess. Not for y'all, but this board had not wanted to. So we're thinking we are going to be mandated to mediate.
This board is mandated to mediate.
Okay.
Doesn't mean that you have to settle the case through mediation, but you are now mandated to mediate the case through the federal mediation process. So what that means is, has to be a federally approved mediator, can't just be, just any old mediator, I guess.
And this could be a long, drawn-out process for mediation, or can it handle pretty quickly? Because I'm hearing from everyone, and I think we all as a board, basically as a community, we are not under CDC guidelines any longer. Basically, Knox County Schools is the only people wearing masks, not right now in Knox County, out of mandate, not out of choice. I know there are people who are choosing to. So following the mediation, which we're going to have to do, if we don't get something else to happen, how quickly do we feel like this could proceed? Just from your experience. I know you don't have a definitive answer.
The judge has ordered mediation to occur within 60 days, period. So it has to be done in 60 days.
I guess my concern is 60 days is, we're getting close to the end of school by that point. Okay.
Mr. Watson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Does that mean to complete within 60 days or to start within 60 days?
To complete the mediation within 60 days.
Okay, and I'm assuming when mediation begins, that would also make any negotiations that we're doing moot, correct? But you would not do both at the same time.
Say that again, sorry.
Well, we're currently negotiating with the plaintiffs, and my assumption would be if we're entering into formal mediation, that would probably cease negotiation, right? It would seem to be moot to do the two things at one time, or am I not correct in that?
It's all part of the same process. Since we're already negotiating, we have to take that into account when we go into mediation. One thing that this board needs to consider for Wednesday is, do you want to continue with the same designees for mediation? And frankly, I think the plaintiffs have expressed a preference for that, because otherwise, mediation ceases to look like what we would normally see as mediation. It would then be a public meeting, similar to what we're sitting in right now.
So I spoke to Mr. Sanders before this meeting, and he was saying there's something in the rules that seems like it might be limiting to us, because you have to mediate in good faith and have people who can actually make the decision in the mediation, but this board can't make a decision outside of the whole groups. So I know you all met after he and I spoke, so can you speak to them?
I mean, this board has to mediate in good faith,
Right.
so that is required by the rules. And if you are giving authority to your designees to mediate in good faith, we feel that satisfies the rule. I mean, again, the only other alternative to designees is going to be a public mediation, which would not look like
Yeah.
anything like a traditional mediation.
Right, yep, and so the board would need to take action to approve those designees, and you're suggesting that we approve the same designees that we've been using for negotiation.
I'm saying you need to approve
Consider that.
designees, and I mean, you have designees that have been negotiating in good faith already.
Right, and then the proposal that you mentioned, who generated that proposal? I didn't hear that part.
It was proposed to be a joint, proposal, so it's been discussed on both sides.
Okay, that's what I was asking, if one side or the other put it forth and the other hasn't spoken to it, or if it's something that's been being worked on together.
It's a joint proposal.
Okay, and then my final question is for Chair Christie. I appreciate your clarification that Mr. Beeler wrote the resolution, but I'm assuming that a board member or board members prompted him to submit a resolution, or did he do that
No.
completely on his own? From
No,
watching the commission meeting, he seemed to indicate that he was approached.
He was,
Yeah.
by me. I asked him because that was not an option at our previous board meeting, and as I have said many times, it would still have to come back to the board
Sure.
for approval, and it was nothing more than to give us something else to consider. And since we spoke at that county commission meeting, just keep in mind, we have had how many other motions filed and lawsuits filed against us? I mean, obviously, it was building up to that, right? But it was just to give us another option or avenue. And he knew that, and I knew that, and it was just, if we had the consent to do that, we could bring it back to the board and discuss it. No guarantee it would even pass, but just another option or path forward, because we don't have a lot of avenues right now. So that was my intent in approached him in my individual capacity. I think, Ms. Coney can send you the communication. It was not
I
sent
don't
on.
need to see the communication.
Was not sent on board chair
Yeah.
letterhead. It was
Yeah.
sent
Point of
as
order.
the 9th district. So that's how that came about.
I think we have a point of order issue here. I think this is getting into the hearing issue and probably shouldn't be discussed today.
We're discussing the resolution.
I was just asking Ms. Christie for her.
Ms. Babb? Well, or Ms. Horn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a question back to the joint proposal that, Mr. Dupler, if you could. Okay, so basically that has been worked on, but has it been submitted to the court yet? You may have said that and I missed it.
Thank you, Ms. Horn. No, so you are correct. This board would have to approve that proposal first. So there's that, and then,
Okay.
and then obviously the plaintiffs would then have to verify.
Okay. And then the next question would be, if, let's say we do that, what would the time frame be on an answer back from the judge? And I'm assuming he would have to answer the question, is that correct?
Say that one more time, sorry.
So if we do approve that, and if it goes to Judge Greer, would the expectation be that he would give us a ruling on it one way or the other?
So we can't guarantee what Judge Greer will do, but the thought is if it's a joint proposal, both sides are agreeing that he would hopefully rule on that fairly quickly.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, I guess what I'm asking, and I want clarification, because I know my big thing is I want these kids out of mass as quickly as possible. And I feel like what we're trying to ask for that would match what the board voted for as a majority back in the fall is we don't want anything tied to the CDC, even though right now the CDC would let us get out of mass. And it seems like the plaintiffs have put forward about tying it to the CDC, but we keep being told by our lawyers that we can't do that because it goes against state law. But I have had some people tell me that this statute is subject to an injunction by a Middle Tennessee case, and so it's basically stated right now that we do have the ability to ask to follow the CDC guidelines for now, which, if they would agree to it, would, while we're trying to mediate it, move us forward. But you're thinking we can't do that? I mean, I keep hearing from y'all that we cannot follow the CDC guidelines because that's going against state. But then I hear that there's a stay through the Middle Tennessee case that allows us to do that. Because I would just like to see us move forward as quickly as possible while we're trying to mediate.
Can I say something too? I've been told the same thing by several other attorneys, that the exact same thing you're saying.
Okay.
But I'm not a lawyer.
So yeah, different attorneys have different opinions. I know that someone reached out to the plaintiff's attorneys, and they have different opinions than we do. Big shocker there. But, so there's a state law that only allows mask mandates in very limited situations. And there is a federal court in Middle Tennessee that's issued a preliminary injunction against that state law. So if you agree to the CDC guidelines based upon that preliminary injunction, and then that preliminary injunction goes away, then you are now in violation of state law. So that's why, our office has been consistent in saying that if you agree to the CDC guidelines, you will eventually be in violation of state law. Maybe not right this instant, okay, because there is that federal court case. But, you're running that risk. And here, again, we're saying that plaintiffs are willing to a joint proposal to, regardless of the reason, take away the mask mandate while we're negotiating and mediating.
They are willing to do that? Or we're proposing it?
That's what I've been talking about, is that, we're talking about a joint proposal to the court to take, regardless of the reason, because we disagree. We disagree with the plaintiffs.
Okay.
But regardless of the reason, take away the mask mandate while we're mediating.
And okay, that's where I was confused. So they're agreeing with us to both put forward that proposal.
It would be a joint proposal.
Okay. I was thinking it was just from us, so thank you for that clarification.
Ms. Bounds?
Well, this may not be relevant right now, but I would just like to remind this board that the CDC is not a lawmaking body. It's a regulatory body. And if we agreed to the CDC, as the plaintiffs have suggested, that could become a precedent, and we would have to follow CDC guidelines wherever it might lead us next fall with their numbers. So I would just caution the board against doing anything that would concede to the CDC.
Ms. Owen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Dubler, if I may, I'd like to say this in a different way that maybe you can't. So if I understand correctly, what you're telling us is that the most expedient thing we can likely do that does not involve the CDC and does not involve the potentiality of a stay for some other part of the county being overturned, would be to accept a joint proposal with the plaintiffs.
Yes, I think that's accurate.
Thank you.
Mr. Watson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to be clear, Mr. Dupler, so I didn't hear in the proposal that it's based on CDC guidance, the joint proposal, it's based on the duration of mediation, correct? Because right now, the
That's
CDC
correct.
guidance, because we're medium, it's off, but let's say next week it went high. If we agreed, the judge agreed, we're in mediation, it's not based on the CDC guidance, it's based on the time frame of mediation, correct?
That's the proposal,
Right.
yes.
Okay. And then.
Up to 60 days, because that's what's been mandated.
Right.
is 60 days for mediation.
And based on the guidance you've been consistent with and the law department has been consistent with around the case in Middle Tennessee, you've obviously been a part of, or the law department's been a part of this proposal. Are you saying as the law department that you don't feel like this proposal will get us into issues because it's not based on CDC guidance? Because it seems like the law, if the stay is removed, would still impact it, correct?
Yes, that's the reason for the joint proposal is that both sides recognize there's a disagreement there.
Sure.
But for the time frame of the mediation, we can agree to take off the mask mandate.
Thank you. And also notice that Director Book is in the room, and we're speaking specifically about this Resolution D. I don't know, Director Book, if you want to speak to this issue.
David Book, Knox County Law Director, 400 Main Street. Two things. Number one, the resolution that went before commission was drafted by the mayor. Richie Beeler did not even see it, nor did I until 5 minutes before that meeting. So that's just a clarification that the mayor is the one that drafted it. I have no idea what went on and who talked to the mayor or whatever. With regard to this, I think I had said that if the school board wanted to hire its own expert or lawyer or whatever to give advice, I'm not dead to that. I said publicly I'd welcome anybody's advice that wants to give it. So if that's what you want to do and it's limited to giving advice, excuse me, because we're handling the lawsuit as we're required to do, whatever this board wants to do, it's out of your pocketbook, and the way I read the thing from commission, we'll recommend to you a lawyer that has ADA education experience, not just any lawyer, but an ADA experienced lawyer, education lawyer, and we recommend that to this board. And then this board looks at that resume or whatever and decides whether or not they want to hire this particular person. If not, it bounces back to us, and we'll come up with another name of some ADA education lawyer. There are very few of them in the state of Tennessee, very few of them. And we have the best there are in the state of Tennessee in our department. But if you want to hire somebody to, say, advise us, we're not going to turn down anybody's advice. So it's up to this board. But keep in mind, if you adopt this resolution and you all hire somebody, they're not taking over the litigation. We continue, we're required to, and will continue to do the litigation in this. And we are dead set against any judge telling us what we must do. I don't know why it gets out in social media that our office is not, is in favor of that. We're not. We raised the constitutional issue about separation of powers, that one judge shouldn't come over and take over what the legislative bodies are to do. We've raised that issue, and it's up in the Sixth Circuit. We have raised every conceivable issue could be raised, and it's up in the Sixth Circuit on appeal now, and it was before Judge Greer.
Director Book, I understand that County Commission, through the resolution, gave the board the ability to ask for outside counsel to advise. Did you have that ability before, like if you chose to, did you have that ability to do that before County Commission gave us the authority to ask you to do that?
We could hire under the charter. We can hire, if we have a conflict of interest, we can hire outside counsel. Or if we need additional help, yes, we would have that authority.
Is there a reason why you chose up until this point not to hire outside counsel for this particular case?
Number one, because we've got the best there are when it comes to ADA education, in my opinion. I've been practicing for 40-some-odd years. I've been doing education law for the last 12. We had Susan Crabtree, who was without a doubt the best in the country. Many of you may remember Susan. Susan retired. We have right now in our office 2 people that worked and learned under Susan Crabtree. They are the best. So no, we didn't consider having to go to the taxpayer's expense to hire somebody else that was going to tell us the same thing that our own staff was telling us.
So I appreciate you saying that if the board asked you to, you would certainly do that. But it sounds like, in your opinion, you have not felt like it's needed up until this point. Is that accurate?
That's very accurate.
Okay, thank you. And then the last question that I have is, given what's happening in the case this week and the potential proposal and the other suit that's been raised, do you think those additional movements in the case and the additional complications now might shift your opinion on the need for outside counsel, or does that remain the same in light of the new facts that Mr. Dupler raised tonight?
No, I don't think we need outside counsel to handle that. That's my honest opinion. I think with our staff, and keep in mind, out of our staff of 10 attorneys, eight of those attorneys, all with federal practice out here. I've been federal 40 years in front of the Eastern District Federal Court. With all that intelligence and experience coming together, no, I don't think we need any extra in view of what's happened this week.
Thank you, Director Book.
Ms. Henderson?
Chair. Director Buke, I just have a couple questions for you. So you said 8 attorneys have been currently working on this case, is that correct?
That's correct.
So what have those 8 attorneys been doing before this case? You had 8 extra attorneys to just focus solely on this case, correct?
I didn't say solely on this case. We operate in our office as a community. When we have any issues that come up or lawsuits, we meet together in a conference room and we discuss it. And everybody's got their experience and they bring to it. So no, I haven't had 8 attorneys doing solely this. We've got some 65 lawsuits out there, several involving the schools,
Okay,
in
so
addition to this one.
how many suggestions have you made to this board to strengthen our case? It seems like everything that's been filed has been reactive. So how many suggestions have you brought to us to strengthen this case that's been going on for 5 months?
I don't understand the question. Number one, you said something about react. When you are a defendant, you react to what's been filed against you.
How many medical experts have you talked to before February on this case?
We had no chance to prior to that lawsuit. The lawsuit, if you read the transcript.
I've read the
No,
transcripts.
hold on. If you read that transcript, you will find that we had a total of, 3 days? 3 days to prepare for that hearing. 3 days.
Back in September, I was told that we had a solid case. We have a slam dunk case. Now all of a sudden we were ambushed. Which one is it, Director Buke?
I've lost you. I don't think we ever said we had a slam dunk case.
That was mentioned back in September
By whom?
by Mr. Sanders.
By who?
Mr. Sanders.
Mr. Who?
David Sanders.
Oh, no, it's not a slam dunk, and David Sanders wouldn't have said it's a slam dunk. What we have is a strong, strong case on appeal that with regard to that should be won on appeal whenever the Sixth Circuit gets around to it.
Last month, Director Buke, you didn't even know the basic facts of this case. You thought we were still peaking in Knox County when the peak was, in fact, a month before.
I've lost you. What about the facts of the case?
last month at County Commission, you didn't know the basic facts of the case. You thought we were still peaking in Knox County, but we had peaked a month prior.
I said because it was peaked, that's why that's what I said, because that's what the judge said. It was peaked when he came to that, now it's peaking down, and that's why we've changed and filed these motions. What more can I say? The facts of the case are that it had peaked. That was the facts before the judge and in the record.
You also thought we have 800 kids with speech issues.
It's 8,000.
We have over 8,000.
I understand.
Oh, you were
and
mistaken. Okay, understand.
I made a mistake when I said 800, because
Got
it's
it.
8,000, obviously.
When I said 8,000.
Yes, it is 8,000. I agree. And I apologize if the 800 misled anybody. I don't think it misled anybody with regard to what's happening in the lawsuit.
So you don't think that the fact that our kids have been in mass for 5 months, we don't need all hands on deck? I don't know any company, Mr. Buke, that has in-house counsel that handles every case. They always hire outside experts to help them.
We are not a normal outside business corporation.
So you're fine with our kids being masked? We don't need all hands on deck. We don't need to do everything we can to
How
get
many
these kids out of
questions-
mask.
Hold on, ask one question at a time. Which one are you asking?
You don't think we need all hands on deck? You don't think we need extra tools in our toolbox?
We don't need extra what?
Tools in our toolbox.
What's an extra tool in the legal toolbox? I don't
Thank you,
understand.
Director
If
Butte.
you'll tell,
I'm
if
done
you'll,
with my
if
question.
you'll
Ms.
define
Babb.
that for me, I'll answer it.
Ms. Babb?
I'm going to direct my question to Mr. Dupler. You're,
Okay.
you're off
So-
the hook with
so we-
me. Okay, Mr. Dupler, I just want clarification because once I finally understood about the joint recommendation, what do we need to do to move that forward as a school board body? Or what would be your recommendation for it?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Babb. So, to be able to file something with the court, as a joint motion or recommendation, I mean, both sides would have to agree upon it, correct? So it would require, a vote of the board to go in that direction. And then obviously the plaintiffs would then have to follow through and agree as well, and then we could file that with the court.
And is there a way for us to vote on this tonight?
That's a good question, and when I look at the policies, this board can have a special called meeting, and normally the special called meeting has to have 48 hours notice, but it also talks about in case of emergency, and that's defined as a sudden, generally unexpected occurrence or set of circumstances demanding immediate action. So with a court order coming out today, then this board might consider that.
So could a member of our board call for a special meeting to take place after this meeting tonight?
It would either have to be set by the chair or by a vote of the majority of the board.
Okay, Ms. Chair, the ball's in your court.
Okay, we can do that. So we can have an emergency special call meeting immediately after this one.
If you feel that this is an emergency, that is allowed under B 161.
Okay, so let's proceed with that then. And we'll just vote on whether we are going to enter into that agreement, and you can read it again at the time. Just that,
Enter into a proposal
Right.
to end the mask, a joint proposal to end the mask mandate while mediation is occurring.
yes. Okay. Mr. Watson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr. Dupler, could you, since that meeting will be directly after this one, could you work on language for that motion, given that you have the proposal?
Yes, but I think it would be very similar to what I just said. I mean, I don't know that we want to get into,
No, I understand. I just want
super
to make sure
precise
that
wording,
that we have good wording and, yeah. Thank you.
Anything that will help get this thing resolved immediately is an emergency, in my opinion. So, yes, I agree.
Okay, so there we go. So we will have an emergency called meeting immediately after this one. Mr. McMillan?
I just want to be clear here. We're gonna deem it an emergency meeting and meet right after this. But the public's not gonna know anything. Do you realize that we're gonna take action before the public ever has noticed that we're dealing with it unless they're watching?
Is that to me?
Yes,
Yeah.
I ask you.
Thank you, Mr.
Mr.
McMillan.
Broderick.
You know, I agree with what you're saying, and in vast majority of cases, it calls for 48-hour notice before a special called meeting. I'm just pointing out to the board that there is this exception, and I gave the definition, and the board chair and the superintendent feel like it's an emergency, so that's the rationale.
Well, I understand the rationale, but I don't know what you can accomplish in a day or 2 days, except to make the public informed. And I would feel better about it if the public were informed before we actually voted on something. My personal preference would be that we do it Wednesday night as opposed to now. I don't think anything can be accomplished tonight that would speed up.
So, can I?
Yes.
So, my understanding from talking to you, Gary, is that if we proceed with this tonight and agree to it, that would allow us to approach Judge Greer with the plaintiffs jointly, possibly tomorrow, and ask that the mandate be lifted while we're mediating. And the judge could actually potentially respond by Wednesday even.
That's accurate. I mean, you know, that's possible. So, I mean, Mr. McMillan, if you're asking about what would speed up the process, that would be the rationale.
Okay, I just want to be sure as to what we were doing and what we intended to accomplish. Thank you.
Ms. Horn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Chairs are at the wrong height. Mr. McMillan, I appreciate your question, but I don't think that it will come as a shock to our community that this board wants our kids out of masks as soon as possible. So for that reason, I think that, you know, I would concur that we should do a vote tonight. So for that reason, I think that this is a special circumstance. Thank you.
Ms. Owen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I feel like we have already given our attorney and our negotiators the permission to do that. So I think this is just making it more official that they can make this specific proposal. So I don't feel like it's out of line with what the community is expecting.
I would agree. Ms.
Yes,
Horn?
thank you, Ms. Christie. I mean, that kind of crossed my mind. I mean, we've already given Ms. Christie and the law department and Mr. Myers the ability to negotiate on our behalf. So this is really, I mean, they could technically do this without the approval of the board, could they not, Mr. Dupler?
No, because,
Okay.
I mean, the negotiation is
Okay.
non-binding, so if a settlement is reached through Chair Christie and Jason
would have
Myers,
to approve it.
it would still have to come back before the
Okay,
board.
all right, thank
So-
you.
So this is, if you want to be expeditious, this would be the way to approach it.
Okay, thank you.
I think there might be more public backlash to not do it tonight than there would be to do it, but that's just my personal opinion. Okay, so do we have any more discussion on item D? Okay, so moving on to item E. Ms. Henderson, I believe this is.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'll try not to push my button again. So with this, you know, we've had a lot going on in the past week, and we have a lot of parents who are beyond frustrated and angry at this point. And I just want it in writing that just to reaffirm that we still believe that math should be the choice of parents. Even today, we've had 3 or 4 different things happen. And I also want it in writing so that the law department just has that document just to strengthen any motions they have going forward. It's always been our position, but I would like it in writing and a vote again to give it to the law department.
Ms. Owen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Dubler, would this resolution change anything that the law department is doing right now?
Thank you, Ms. Owen. That's a good question. I think Ms. Henderson's saying that it would reaffirm, and I believe that would be an accurate representation because, a specific answer to your question, no. If you were to vote for this resolution, we would still be doing the same thing, which is fighting as hard as we can to unmask the students.
So any more discussion on that item? Okay. Item F, I believe this is also yours, Ms. Henderson.
I've had a very busy week. So with this resolution, I've talked to several schools last year, also this year, that some schools are doing normal activities and some schools are not doing normal activities, and some are using the excuse of COVID. And our children need their childhood back, and I think that the board needs a resolution to prove or to say that all normal activities need to resume. I've talked to schools that have canceled their Veterans Day program this year, spelling bees, limited parents for Christmas parties. I've talked to schools that have canceled field trips, and limiting parents and not having events at this point in time is unacceptable.
Ms. Owen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I feel like this is an administrative decision and not appropriate for board consideration. This is something that has to do with individual principals making those decisions for their buildings and our superintendent overseeing that. Thank you.
Ms. Bounds?
And I would argue that this is exactly the reason why we need this, because there's so much confusion, lack of clarity, principals acting on their own behalf, even against what this board has said and what our superintendent has said. And for some reason, they feel like they have the ability to go against that. And I think it just needs to be entirely stated and clarified to the administrators at the schools that this is what this board intends for them to do for the remainder of the year. And therein is the problem. It's the individual administrations at each school determining their own actions, and it needs to be unified across this district.
Ms. Horn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know Ms. Henderson brought something similar last year. It was closer to the end of the school year, and so at that time, my concern was that it was so close to the end of the school year that it could cause difficulties in school. So, however, we are now a year later. We still have issues going on in schools that kids are being limited to various things across schools. And like Ms. Bounds said, principals making decisions on their own. So I feel like we're in March, the beginning of March. There's plenty of time for principals to understand that the expectation of this board is that we return to normal. We represent the community. So if this is what our communities are telling us, this is a way for this board to communicate that to the superintendent, who will then carry that out. Thank you.
Mr. Watson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Superintendent Thomas, can you speak to the issue at hand?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, can you speak to the resolution that Ms. Henderson's bringing forth around, what's the title of it? Sorry, I got it rolled down here. Yeah, all school activities should return to normal. There's some concern that maybe some schools are not doing that and, kind of going their own way. Can you just speak to that issue?
Sure, and again, I agree with the resolution. I mean, we've talked about it as a staff. I think the situation now is much better, obviously, than it was, and for the benefit of our students and our families, that's what we're about. I support the resolution, and
No, that's not exactly my question. So I think we're all in agreement in terms of the intent of the resolution. I'm asking, do you have any information or understanding around what's happening across the district where maybe schools are not doing normal activities?
I don't have specific examples of that, but the statement was made that, the principals make the decision at the school level, and certainly we've authorized our principals to do that. But as far as saying that it's consistent across the board, I would be surprised if it were consistent across the board. So again, if the board wants to approve this resolution, then we'll make sure that the consistency is there. I don't have specific examples.
Sorry, Superintendent Thomas, I'm not trying to push on this, but the way you just said that, you said, if this resolution passes, then we will make sure. Are you not making sure now because we don't have this resolution?
I think our grade level directors, and I don't know if, okay, Ms. Thompson's here, so.
I guess what I'm asking is, you've said this is something we're trying to do, and what I'm trying to understand is, does this help you do it, or does that make sense what I'm asking?
I think it helps, obviously, if the board approves this, I think it does help. I mean, this is what the board wants, this is what the community wants, and we want to be sure that we do what, the board directs us to do, and do that with fidelity and consistency, and I know we've had conversations about this over the last few weeks, so, Ms. Thompson, if you,
Yes.
Madam Chair, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
Sure. So we did have this discussion. We've had this discussion a couple of times, and I think Danny Trent is my counterpart, secondary. He is out of town, but he and I both have communicated to our principals that effective March the 1st, then we should be resuming normal activities such as field days and awards days, ceremonies, all of those kinds of things. Schools should be return to our practices based on the way they were before COVID. Now, I will say that there have been some activities that principals have gotten creative with and have learned some things during this 2-year time to be more efficient, and just a variety of things that we've learned in this experience. But we do want to encourage parents to participate. We want to encourage, children to be able to have their parents with them at field days if that was their normal practice. We do have some schools who are limited based on their capacity of the cafeteria. We have some schools that have really, in these last 2 years, their enrollment has expanded far beyond what it was pre-pandemic. And so for us to say everybody should allow parents to come and have lunch with their children and allow that, some schools just do not have the capacity to physically do that. And so we've asked them, whatever limitations they've placed has not been because of COVID. It's because of not being able to seat children and parents together. Now, some of our schools have outside picnic tables and other ways to accommodate parents, and we just are encouraging principals to get creative as much as possible. But I believe that our principals can make that happen and make families feel comfortable coming and visiting schools and feel welcomed without having a policy. That's my opinion, because I feel like they're in general are welcoming to having parents and getting back to normal as much as possible. I think there could be some unintended consequences of having a policy and taking that authority out of principals' hands. So I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Ms. Owen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Unintended consequences is exactly what I wanted to ask about. So if I understand correctly, last week you have already asked principals to go back to resuming normal activities as much as possible. Do you feel like if we adopted this resolution that it might cause some principals to feel that they've been hamstrung, that they've been asked not to do innovative things that they have found over time?
So I feel there might be situations where principals cannot physically accommodate parents. I know we have situations where principals cannot physically accommodate having parents to come and eat lunch with their children, as a specific example. And if there is a policy and parents bring the policy that says we should let them do that, then that puts them in a situation of breaking board policy when they physically cannot accommodate parents in the cafeteria.
I hear what you're saying. So you're saying that if we put this in place, there may be that expectation that because it's happening at this school, the parent is going to expect it to happen at this school when maybe it never happened here to begin with.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Ms. Bounds?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Thompson, can you kind of help us with some of these examples of the creative ways that principals have found over the last 2 years that work really well that they're doing now in place of what they used to do? What are some of your examples?
So again, I said the picnic table. So we've had principals that have tried to accommodate parents during the pandemic time where they would allow them to come and schedule times. They've had times where they have been flexible with their schedule, their lunch schedule, and allowed children to eat in the classrooms or eat in the cafeteria or eat in the outside, just to try to make those accommodations.
Okay. First, I would like to say that I've worked under a lot of principals over 23 years or over a 40-year span in Knox County, and I have the utmost respect for our principals. But at the same time, I know you and I last year dealt with a situation after the superintendent clearly stated that children were not to be masked on the playground. And yet my granddaughter continued to have to wear a mask many weeks after that. And I came back to you several times, and finally that class was allowed to unmask on the playground. So that's an example from last year, but I also know there are examples this year, and Mr. Watson, I can provide you with a lot of them if you would like. There seems to be a big difference between the elementary and the secondary as far as how that looks. I don't want to create problems for our administrators. That's not my intent at all. But I do want the Knox County to realize that when this board directs the superintendent to do something and the superintendent directs the administration to do something, that they should follow those directions. And I think that has, over the past 2 years, I know in one of my schools in particular that parents were able to come to lunch prior to COVID. And to my knowledge, this year they still were not allowed to, but they were using the spacing as a reason for that. And so I think there's a little bit of, I hate to say it, but I think we can find reasons if we want to limit the amount of interaction in our schools. So I would support this resolution, and I feel strongly that while I respect our administrators, they need to all be held accountable for what the superintendent has mandated or stated in his meetings. Thank you.
Superintendent Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. I was just going to point out, again, in the resolution, it says to the greatest extent possible. So I think that does give some flexibility. If it's something that's not possible, then you can't do it. But so I think the flexibility is there. That's written into the resolution.
Who's next? Ms. Horn?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate you pointing that out, Superintendent Thomas, because that's what I pulled up the resolution just to relook at it again. It's not a policy. It's basically a position statement. And so I feel like that it is important for this board to make this position statement, because going back to what Ms. Bounds said, I don't know how many calls we've gotten over the last year that so and such school is doing this, even though we had conversation and we had been assured that principals had been directed otherwise. So I feel like the whole community needs to know what this board's position on this, and board members can vote on it if they choose to, but if we vote in the affirmative on this, I feel like that our community will know, every staff member will know, principals can blame it on us if they have teachers that don't want to do that this is the board's expectation that we're giving to the superintendent. So I intend to vote to support it.
Mr. Watson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Horn and Mr. Thomas, I was going to say the same thing, that this really is a position statement. It doesn't have the weight of policy. Ms. Bounds, the reason I asked Superintendent Thomas that isn't because I don't know of instances in our own schools where that occurs, but I thought, given that the board gave examples of when it is occurring, it was important to give the superintendent the chance to speak to his knowledge. So,
Ms. Henderson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to reiterate what Superintendent Thomas and Ms. Horn said. I did write this as a resolution, not a policy, and I did specifically put in there the flexibility. I wrote in there the greatest extent possible, so it did have that flexibility, but also gave that clarification of this is what we expect as a board so that our community can go back to normal.
Ms. Bounds? Mr. Watson?
thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question for Ms. Henderson. I know you brought something similar at the end of last year. It was in the form of policy last year, right? And
Correct.
And so this is shifting into
Correct.
more of a resolution?
Yes, so last year I did write it as a policy because I was hearing many of the same concerns from parents. And I did write it as a policy last year. And last year had some more stricter guidelines
I would
on.
say some teeth in it.
Yes, yes. And so that's why I'm writing it just as a resolution this year so that we do have just some clarification and flexibility in there.
Thank you.
Ms. Babb?
And I guess I would say if this is passed, that as Ms. Thompson talked about, we're talking about curtailing events because of COVID, that we keep seeing excuses. There obviously are reasons that certain things have changed at schools because of size and things like that, but we're not wanting COVID to be used as the reason a school is not doing anything. That's kind of what I think this is being done as, whereas there might be good reasons where they no longer can have parents come in the same way as before just because of size of school or something like that.
Yes, yes. I've heard from schools that have grown in the past few years and maybe you can't have lunch as often with your children. But I have heard from many, many parents this year that some have used COVID while others, you know, some schools are having spelling bees, some aren't. And I'm hearing the ones that are not are maybe saying COVID. So that's why I brought forth this resolution.
So any more discussion on that item? Okay. So moving on to item G. Mr. Dupler, did you want to start with this one, or Mr. McMillan, or? Your name's by this, so.
Well, thanks, Madam Chair. I don't know that I want to start. Mr. McMillan, do you want to
No,
start? You go
I
ahead.
want you to start with a definition, I guess.
Okay, well, I guess I can start with the fact that the Ethics Committee met, and in that Ethics Committee meeting, the discussion, and it's public record, but the discussion was, are these on their face ethics complaints, which require some type of conflict of interest, financially motivated. So the consensus and the vote of the meeting or the committee was that they weren't ethics complaints, but these are complaints that appear to be on their face, alleging violations of board policy. So that's why it was then shifted to the entire board, which the other point to make is even if these were ethics complaints, I mean, what would happen is that there would have to be a public hearing, and then the ethics committee would then recommend something, and then it would go to the whole board, which the whole board would have to vote on this sooner or later. So, but again, not ethics complaints as espoused by the ethics committee. And so now they're here on the board, before the board under B-171. And there's been some discussion individually about B-171. Well, that's really the only policy that one can point to from the board to handle complaints. The question has been raised, well, isn't it more for employee complaints or parent complaints or things like that that would then rise up, and that is what the policy is designed for, complaints that would rise up from teacher to principal to higher administration and then eventually to the board. But when you've got complaints about board members, well, I mean, you start at the top. So here they are, and then the other question that was raised individually was, well, what about a procedure? Well, I mean, if you look at B-171, it's pretty vague. I mean, it just talks about complaints are submitted to the superintendent, and then those have to be 7 days before the regular board meeting, and then the board can then discuss it, and presumably the complainant would then have to present the complaint before the board. So that's about it. Back to you, Mr. McMillan.
Thank you, Mr. Dupler. Just add one thing. The three-member ethics committee did vote, and it was unanimous to send it to the board. That's all I have to say about that.
Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. McMillan, as the chair of the Ethics Committee, and I understand the vote and appreciate that, and to Mr. Dupler's point, B-171 is very vague in terms of process. It really wasn't designed for this. Did the Ethics Committee discuss some type of process for the board to go through on Wednesday night? Because what it probably should not be is a free-for-all. So is there any recommendation from the Ethics Committee in terms of a process to discuss this on Wednesday night?
Mr. McMillan.
Well, everything that we discussed, we discussed in front of Mr. Dupler. I'm not sure, we thought that we would pass it on to the entire board and then, see what they wanted to do with it, how they wanted to pursue it. So, I mean, the Ethics Committee has done about as much as we could do with it, Mr. Watson. And we didn't discuss in detail, we talked a little bit about what might happen, but I'll just say this. We're into a situation now where we're getting complaints right and left. We're going to spend more time dealing with that than we do on the business of education if we don't, bring it to an end. And I think this was part of the hopes that we would be able to bring it to an end on Wednesday night. Does that answer your question?
Yes, Mr. McMillan, I completely agree with your sentiment. And I guess my thought is maybe the one thing that the board should discuss tonight in relationship to this is how will this be handled on Wednesday night? Because I don't think we want to make it up as we go along, since there's not really any guidance in terms of procedure.
Ms. Bounds.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, other than Mr. McMillan, I think I'm the longest-serving board member on this board, and Mr. McMillan and I have had the opportunities to watch a lot of different compositions of boards over the last, me over the last 8 years and him longer than that. And what really concerns me is the board's job is about educating. So based on that, I will be bringing a motion on Wednesday night, and I would like to read it. A motion to dismiss all pending complaints against all board members on the grounds of the strained political status of the community and officials, particularly around masking and on the grounds that board policies B-171 and B-220 need revision specification on procedure and forms for filing complaints. So I think that addresses somewhat of what Mr. Watson said. I think it needs to go back to board policy, which we're having on March 23rd, and we need to work on these policies as to how these complaints come forward. So I will be making a motion to dismiss all of the complaints at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Bounds. Could you have that motion, the wording of it, sent to the board through Ms. Coatney?
Yes, I'll be glad to.
Thank you.
Mr. Duport, did you have something you needed to add or no?
I think Ms. Bounds kind of headed it off. I mean, I was just going to say that the Ethics Committee did talk about, as far as process, talked about that that B-220 doesn't set out a process, but previous ethics committees have a process for hearings before that committee. But specifically, this ethics committee talked about needing a formal complaint form and looking at that for policy review, and that's also something that would benefit B-171.
Ms. Sowen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In our Ethics Committee, we did discuss the prior process that was laid out for hearings, and it was my understanding that that process has sort of already been put in motion because we have already contacted all of the people who have filed complaints for them to come and be a part of a hearing. So if we have already put that process in motion and the people who have made complaints are expecting to be heard, I'm not sure that it will be a very good look for us to ask these people to respond within this small amount of time, to agree to be here for a hearing, and then tell them, no, you don't get to come. And I know that some of these are against me too, and I don't think it's fair for us to ask these people to be here and then tell them, no, never mind.
If I can address that, Madam Chair, and that is exactly why I brought this motion that I will be making Wednesday night forward, so that all of you would be aware, and the people that have been contacted will also be aware that there is a possibility, because I don't want to inconvenience anybody, but I really believe strongly that we need to dismiss all of these pending complaints against the board. So I think most of them probably are watching this meeting, and so they will have the knowledge that this could pass, and if it passes, that would eliminate their coming before the board. So that's why I brought it tonight instead of waiting till Wednesday.
Mr. McMillan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had every intentions of doing what Ms. Bounds is saying, but, you know, it's fine if she brings it, because we've got to put an end to this, because there'll be people filing here, there, and yonder. If we try to hear them, we're not gonna get anywhere, as I said a while ago. So it's time for it to stop, and I had every intention of us moving on, just discussing it and moving on. There's nothing really that we could do to board members except take a censure vote, and that would take 5 members, and I doubt seriously that that would happen. So, you know, I think as we speak, and I hesitate to say this, but I think Ms. Bounds and myself are the only 2 board members that don't have something filed against them. That's how ridiculous it is. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No, she does.
Well, it was hinted at, I think.
Did you get what?
Yeah, it's been hinted at. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah. Ms. Babb, did you have
All right.
some?
Yeah, I kind of, I think going along with what they're saying is that I think there's some misunderstanding of school board members, we really are, who we are beholden to is our voters. And if they don't like us and they don't like what we're doing, you don't vote us back in. And we don't work for the superintendent, and I don't mean that in any way ugly to the superintendent, but the way the structure is we are elected, the superintendent is our employee. He has no authority over us. Actually, no employees of Knox County Schools have any authority over us. And I personally feel like I am a friend of everybody on the school board. And we don't always disagree. Oftentimes we disagree. There's different ones of y'all have probably disagreed with on almost everything. But at the end of the day, I am personally not going to come in judgment of the acts that my fellow board members are going to do. That is not where I feel is my job either. And that's where I'm going to have a hard time with this. And actually, there was something pointed out about if you have given money to somebody running, you really shouldn't be in judgment of them. And I have given to somebody's campaign, so I actually feel like I cannot judge anybody. So I wouldn't even be taking part in this next Wednesday because I just don't feel like it's an appropriate job for me to be judgmental of the people on my school board.
Ms. Horn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Ms. Babb, that's exactly what I was going to say. When I was chair, I was contacted on multiple occasions asking how we could deal with a certain board members, and that was always my answer. Board members are accountable to the people. The voters are who the board members are accountable to, and so, and that's just the way it is. So, granted, there are going to be decisions that this board makes that the public does not like, and that's just going to be the nature of it. But I think, as Mr. McMillan said, we could spend all of our time talking about that kind of thing, or we could talk about the thing that I know we all care about, which is, and that we can all agree about. I appreciated that Dr. Ryswick pointed that out during the community forum when he was speaking. And I think we need to remember that. I mean, I think that's such an important point that he made, is that we're all here because we do care about children and we care about our students and we want the best for every single one of them. So I think we need to we need to focus on those things and not on those places that we disagree. Thank you.
Okay. So we will move on to public forum. Ms. Coatney?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have one speaker that's registered this evening, Helena Rago. She's not present, so Madam Chair, board forum.
So we'll move on to board forum. Mr. Jen?
I guess we will go quick because I understand that we have another called meeting after this. But basically, with spring break coming up, students, please do take a rest. You deserve it. We'll be back after 1 week, but for that 1 week, take a break. Get some rest, relax, do some fun things. And also, as I believe Ms. Christie pointed out earlier, the application for the student representative position for next year is open. So please do apply to that if you're at all interested.
Thank you. Ms. Owen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We recently had a really good opening at the Teacher Supply Depot. There has been a lot of massive organization going on with our staff at the Teacher Depot, and they have gone through everything in the whole place, taken out things that are old and kind of disheveled and replaced them with lots and lots of new supplies. I can't even tell you how many hundreds of 3-ring binders went out the door this past weekend. Lots and lots of very, very happy teachers with lots of supplies to finish out the school year strong. So we appreciate everyone who helped with that, all the student volunteers who helped with that, and especially the item on our agenda for additional funds for the Teacher Depot, because we have moved from that model where we were just begging for any little tiny used pencil to a model where we actually have brand new things for our teachers to come and be able to use in their classrooms. So if you haven't visited the depot, I encourage you to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Watson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know many of us got to go around the district this past week for Read USA and got to go into some of our classrooms and read with our students. I just wanted to say how much I appreciated that opportunity, and also was so impressed with our educators and our young people and our administrators and the work that they're doing. So appreciate the sentiments here tonight in terms of focusing on education and making sure that, we're about that work. So it's always good to be in our schools. And also, too, to echo what Mr. Jen is saying, is that, so my wife being an educator, I know sometimes you never take that hat off, even when you get an opportunity, like a spring break or something like that. And just want to encourage our teachers and our other folks who work in our schools to find that time and take some of that during the spring break, because you certainly deserve it.
Ms. Beth?
I also got to read at Rocky Hill Elementary to fifth graders and to Green Magnet kindergartners, and it was a joy to do so, especially those hugs from the kindergartners. Boy, that makes it worth being on school board. But I would just like to say I'm on the Partners in Education